Let's take a look at Lab 7.1, opening files and performing file input. Now, working with files is one of my favorite things to do. Let's say you're working your way up the ladder in a game of Hearthstone or some other game, and you want to keep track every time you play a game of your stats. You could write a simple Python script to save your data to a text file, and then you could run another Python script to read your file in occasionally. It's pretty fun. So in this lab, we're going to use flowers.py, which I have open in VS Code. And we're going to write Python statements that will open the input file, flowers.dat, for reading. And then we're going to write the priming read statement and have a while loop to read the input until the end of file is reached. Now in Python, the end of file is usually a blank line. And in the body of the while loop, we're going to print the name of each flower and where it can be grown, sun or shade. So let's take a look. There's nothing in our file here except some comments, so we'll have to work with that. Let's take a look at flowers.dat. So our flowers.dat, pretty straightforward. I see the name of a flower, and then I see whether it can be in the shade or the sun. And then I see the name of a flower, and then I can see the sun or the shade. Name, sun or shade, name. So this is pretty consistent all the way to the end of the file. But this isn't the way that Python sees the file, because if you'll notice, shade starts on a different line than Astable, and Dahlia is on a different line than sun, which means there's a character in here that tells us where the new line is. So let's take a look in Python and see how this file reads. So let's make sure I'm in the directory. I see my flowers.dat, so let's take a look at flowers.dat from the terminal. Okay, that's the right file. So I'll open up Python, and let's just look inside flowers.dat. So I'll say with, and I'll open up flowers.dat, and I'll call that F as in file, not F as in flowers. And then let's see, for each line in flowers, let's print the line and we'll see what we come up with. Now remember, we're still in the Python REPL, but this is showing me a little space under each one. Now I don't see a space in the original text, but Python's showing that. So let's take another look. Let me run this command again, except this time I'm going to print the expression, the whole representative expression, and let's see what Python sees. So this is the string expression for each line, and there is that new line \n right there on each one. So for this to work, for this script to work, we're going to have to open our file, just like you do in the PythonPal PDF, following the directions. We're going to open that up as a file, and then we're going to work through each line in the file. Except in our directions, we want to print the name of each flower and where it can be grown. So we're going to have to read these in and print one on each line. So let's give a try and see what we're going to have here. So to open the input file, you know we're going to do this with our open statement. So with open, I'll say flowers.dat as F for a file. And then we're going to need to read the records in. So it's going to open one line unless we run a loop. So I'll say the flower name is that very first line we're going to read in. So I'll say F flowers, F dot. Let's do a read line. And when we know that when we read that in, we're going to get the string and we're going to get a little \n return. So let's just strip out the new lines and strip out any white space. And we'll use our strip command for that. So that's going to read in the first line and strip out the new line. So flower name is going to be, if I look over here, flower name is going to be Astable, just like that. So now the next thing we want to do, so we wrote the Python statement that will open the input file for reading, and we did our priming read statement. There we go. So we've got a while loop that will read the input until the end of file is reached. So that is this one over here. So I'll come down one. And within this loop, I'm going to say while, because it's a while loop, while the flower name is, and in this case, when you get to the end of the text file, you're going to get a blank line. So as long as the flower name isn't blank, so as long as it's not blank, then we can go ahead and we can read. Now the first line we read is here. This is a little bit of a brute force way to do this, but we already know the first name is here. So the next thing we're going to get is shade or sun, right? So we know what our pattern is. So let's say sun or shade, and that's going to be the next line that we read, which is going to be this. So this is going to be our pattern. We're going to read that in, and then we want to print that. We're going to print that to the terminal. So we're going to print that flower name. And well, we can do this as an F string, or we can just do simply is grown in the sun or shade. And I think we're going to want, no, it's going to give us a space automatically. We don't need to special format this one. And then, of course, once we do that, we have to go read the next line of the file, because once this is blank, this will end, and then this will close the file. So let's go ahead and read in the next one by just copying this and running it down here. Let me save that, and I'll go ahead and run this. Let me get out of that REPL. So I'll Python 3 flowers.py. Let's see how our work is. Okay, flower name, sun or shade, all the way down the